I'm going to share my screen. I believe you were going to lead us off with a kind of a big picture introduction if you're still willing to do that.
Yes, of course. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're really excited to have you all here and excited to offer really this part 2 of our series, Teaching in Virtual Environments. So I guess it's been a couple of months ago. Time flies. But we offered a 3-part series in Teaching in Virtual Environments, facilitated by Ellie. And I see one of our other facilitators, Victor, is here. Hello, Dr. Victor Ho from Malaysia. And so it was, we had so many participants who were like, this was great, and we got the conversation started, but let's continue. So that's why we decided to offer another 3 parts. We have one in November, one in December, and one in January, as you can see there. And these are, Ellie will tell you more, but they're really designed to be quite interactive. So I'm looking forward to this. I just wanted to share with you quickly, if you are not familiar with the APRU and the APRU Global Health Program, just wanted to introduce you. So APRU is the Association of Pacific Rim Universities. It's a nonprofit network of 55 leading research universities in the Asia Pacific. And it is, the Secretariat is based in Hong Kong. It's been around for more than 20 years now. And the Global Health Program is one of several programs within the network. The Global Health Program is housed at my university, the University of Southern California, and I am the director of that program. So we have a number of activities in it throughout the year, and we have a group of working groups related to kind of key topics of interest to our members. And one of them is global health education and technology. And so this working group has organized, along with the University of Oregon and Ellie Vandergrift, this series to help our members and learn more about how we can meet the challenge of teaching in global environments. So that's probably all I'm going to say right now. I can put our social media info and our website info in the chat if you're interested in learning more about the working groups or all of the other activities that we have going on within the Global Health Program.
Great. Thank you so much, Melissa. The goals for today, my colleague Julie Clark and I'm at the University of Oregon and Julie's at the University of Melbourne. We're going to talk about pedagogical, technological, and peer support through this APRU network so that you can think about some new technology to use in your classroom. And really today we're going to focus on why you might want to use technology to lead part of your decision making. And really our goal is to provide this network for APRU universities and other colleagues globally to connect and realize that we're not alone as we're trying to scramble to figure out how to teach our courses online or in new virtual environments. The format is that we'll spend about 20 to 30 minutes with some information that Julie and I will each share about our universities, about our teaching, some research that's tied into that. We then have some small group discussions, so we'll spend about 30 minutes in small breakout rooms, and then we'll come back together for the last 30 minutes and talk about the ideas that came up in your breakout rooms. Many of us have spent a lot of hours on Zoom at this point, but a couple of features you might want to be aware of. There's a hand raising feature in the participants link at the bottom. I don't know that we have anything today where we're going to ask you to annotate the slides, but you may find that you want to have an old-fashioned piece of paper and a pencil and take some notes. It looks like most of you have found your audio and video controls in the lower left-hand corner. And we are going to use breakout rooms, and we encourage you to use the chat throughout any time in the session. Share any questions, any comments that you would like to share with the entire group. And I forgot to turn on the Mentimeter. So I am going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment. And while I'm getting the Mentimeter up in the chat, some of you have already started to say where you're joining us from today, but I would love to see other locations that are represented today. I'm going to put those in the chat. Julie, do you want to read those out as they come in?
Sure. We have Mexico and Oregon and Malaysia all represented at the moment. They're all coming in. Ecuador, Auckland with an M, which is great. I'm sure that's Auckland with an N.
Great, thank you. All right, that was just long enough for me to get the Mentimeter up. All right. Some of you may have used Mentimeter before. It is a polling software. And to access this poll that I've put up, if you go to the website at the top of the screen, it's menti.com. And then you can type this code in. And Mo will probably put that in the chat. And the other thing that I can do is that I could get the link and put the link in there, I think. Great, thank you very much, Mo. And we're so grateful that our colleagues from the Philippines are able to join us. Again, the power is back and you're cleaning up after the second typhoon. There we go. One person has answered the Menti. There we go. All right. So I have this poll set up so that you can choose as many options as you would like of which of the following technologies do you use to support student learning? All right, so far we have that across this group, and 8 of you have responded. Feel free to keep responding. Sometimes it takes a while depending on your internet connection. The polling software, we can talk more about the various types of polling software. Small group discussion breakouts, we're going to practice those to get to today. Pre-recorded videos and learning management systems. Shared documents. We're also going to practice using a type of shared document today. We're going to use a Google document. Great. All right, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint slide, but we can check back in with this later if it's still capturing your answers. Second question that I had, and this is one where you're going to type in, is why do you use this type of technology? So let me go back here to the Menti poll, go to the next one. A few more answers came in. You can see that pre-recorded lectures are still pretty high, and then a smattering of other types of technology. All right, so in the same poll, now that I've moved to the next screen on your device, if you're on a phone or if you're on a computer, it should come up with this new question. What other categories of technology do you use? Is there something that I forgot?
The poll was only letting us choose one answer, by the way.
Oh, it was. Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to set it as multiple. It may have defaulted back to me for just one. Okay. So if there was something that you did not get to record on that last one, what else do you use? And do feel free, Angela, I see your note. Feel free to type in the chat. That's fine too. Happy to have you do that. All right, Zoom, WhatsApp. So you're connecting on your phone. H5P interactives, puzzles, Teams, Nearpod, Meet, podcasts, video calls of different forms. In the chat, I also see the whiteboard feature on Zoom. Okay, great. Discussions on Zoom, perusal for reading primary literature and having students in real time comment on primary literature. Online face-to-face meetings. Excellent. Okay, and one more question. Why do you use technology to support student learning? Okay, engagement. And again, if you're in a situation where it's easier to use the chat, please do use the chat. Great, it's easy to track. Certainly it's easy for me to see what answers are coming in and how many people are participating, absolutely. Ah, you moved online, so it made it so that you suddenly had to do this, okay? Great. Active engagement, can't meet students face-to-face. Could improve your knowledge and because of the pandemic, okay? Synchronous discussions. All right, so a specific type of engagement in real time. Students are in different physical locations, so they can interact with each other even from different physical locations. Okay, another comment here about the shift due to the pandemic, online learning. Okay, and one more that I haven't read out yet. It's easy to access, okay? Can better engage students in the learning, and the students love it. Okay, great. Our students, many of our students have had phones since they were very little. Not all of them, but many. Great. Okay, it's easy to score exams, and you've had to do it, and we've got this virtual teaching environment. Okay, great. So some practicality, that this is where we are right now. There are some realities of trying to reach students. Those are all great reasons that we might need to use technology, or we want to serve a specific purpose of how we want students to engage. I saw both of those types of answers. And Julie and I are going to talk about kind of both of those frameworks as we think about technology in our classrooms. For those of you who've just joined us, my name is Ellie Vandegrift, and I'm at the University of Oregon, where I run a global STEM education program. There's some research out there about online instruction and some factors that technology can help support. And these include developing our students' communication skills, building their technological competence. We can provide immediate feedback. We saw that in the Menti poll just a moment ago. Our students might develop administrative skills. We might also need it to track students and provide immediate feedback and be very responsive. We can monitor student learning, and it also is a way to provide students support, either from faculty to students or students to students. I really like this image thinking about how do we use technology. So there's kind of a lot going on here, but the big areas here are that we have a content knowledge that we want our students to learn. That's in the blue, the content knowledge. There's also some set of technological knowledge that we might want students to know. I think about my field of biology. There's some practicalities of even knowing how to create a formula in a spreadsheet that a student needs to know how to do. That's a technical skill. But then there's also some sort of pedagogical knowledge that I bring to the classroom. And the intersection of this is this framework of what this particular paper calls is this technological, pedagogical content knowledge. They've got a name for this TPAC. And how does that intersect? What content am I teaching? What technological knowledge do I have? And do my students have, and what do they have available? And also, where's my level and comfort with different types of pedagogy? How much am I hoping for a top-down instructor sharing the information as opposed to an interactive environment with our students? And all of these together can impact and influence the technology that we choose for our classroom. So the question is, how do we decide what technology to use? And I'm going to share an example from a class that I'm teaching this quarter, where first of all, I really started with what were my goals for the class. And here's a picture of my class that I'm teaching. My colleague Mo, who is on helping us with Zoom today, helps me with Zoom in this class. This is a class that we're offering at the University of Oregon for online learning, how to be a better online student. We're offering it in person so that new international students could meet the visa requirements to be able to enter the country this fall. So we have a handful of students in this particular section. On any day, there are 2 or 3 students in this room that seats 520, and there's 20 or 30 students who are online. They're on a Zoom call. They're all synchronous. And so as I started to think about this, I thought, what is the technology? How's technology going to help me? What are my goals for this class? What are my goals for student learning? So I thought about some technologies, and these are what I'm using this quarter. I am using a learning management system. We have Canvas as our system, and this is a place where I post weekly pre-work and post-work, and students complete it. We're using 2 of the features on there. One is private only to me, and one they can interact with each other, because I thought that that was important for them to have some things that they might only want an instructor to see, but to have some conversation with each other. We work on collaborative documents during class. We're going to practice a collaborative document today with a Google slide that we'll use. I use polling software like the Menti that we just tried out. I use breakout rooms in Zoom because I want students to be able to interact with each other. We use the chat feature because not everybody feels comfortable turning on their video or is in an environment where they can turn on their video or has strong enough bandwidth. And so there's a lot of equity issues around that. And then the other technology that I would add in here is that I have used video announcements to share information with students that I just wanted to quickly get out to everybody, but they're probably tired of reading all the documents that I've posted. So just a quick 30-second or minute-long video allows me to share some information with my students. So in this example, I really started with what did I want students to be able to do? And then I picked technology that was simple, that I knew how to use, because I've never taught a high flex class where I have some students in person and some students remote in this particular fashion. And so I really needed to think about how can I use all of the pieces simultaneously. I'm going to turn it over to Julie now, who's going to share experience with faculty in her law school. And just let me know when you want me to go to the next slide, because I'm controlling it right now.
Sure. Thanks, Ali. Well, my name's Julie Clark, and I'm the Associate Dean for Digital Technologies at the Melbourne Law School, as Ali mentioned, at the University of Melbourne. I'm going to perhaps focus less on my personal teaching experience this year, but on how we've worked with staff within the faculty this year to move things online, and the things we've taken into consideration in both designing subjects for online and how we've chosen and integrated technology into that. I did first want to agree with everything that Ali's said, both on how to go about selecting the technologies and also the sorts of technologies that Ali's mentioned in terms of keeping in touch with students. I think particularly support the importance of identifying goals and selecting technology to support those goals and not the other way around. So not forcing the proverbial square peg into the round hole just because the square peg looks really, really exciting and appealing. Choosing the simple and what works for your goals is the most important. I did just want to give a little context to this discussion, because I think that a number of us are experiencing this, as Ali mentioned, this year. I do teach in a law school, but one that has had a very long commitment to face-to-face teaching. We had very, very limited online offerings, and certainly for the face-to-face offerings, there was very little supplemental online material. So everything was new for the student cohort and for the staff cohort when flicking to online this year. And so I think it's important to keep in mind that context when thinking about how to design and what technologies to select. And I think equally important is just the really weird time in which this is all occurring at the moment, and all these discussions around tech, I do think need to take into account that context. Exactly what we do, how we do it, what technology we choose would, I think, differ for the long-term planned online or blended teaching environment that students self-select into versus what has happened in many institutions this year where we've been forced into this environment. So historically, students would select in, the staff would often be selected based on their experience and willingness to use technology. Students would know that they needed to have certain network setups and so on to be able to study online. Because everyone's been forced into this, I think we have to keep in mind as well that students may not have that sort of access, so technology selection needs to take account of that. They might also just be pretty resentful of lost campus experience, worried about the future, not have the ideal setup at home and so on. And almost certainly, and I think this is underestimated a bit, inexperienced at online learning. There tends to be an assumption that they're just techno geeks because they use digital technologies, most of them all their life, and that's very different than using the technology that's needed to succeed in online study. There's a particular technique to doing it, and it tends to be a little bit different than what they're used to. So I think all that colours their experience and our perspective of what their experience is going to be, and that needs to factor into choice of technology and how we design subjects. But that said, I think there's still a lot that can be drawn from existing pedagogical principles for online subject development and technology selection. Pretty much hold true for both, but perhaps a few other considerations to be taken into account. Ali mentioned the TPAC model. I thought I'd just briefly highlight the fairly popular community of inquiry model for online education development, developed by Randy Garrison and his colleagues. I think it's perfectly consistent with everything that's been said as well, but provides a bit of a model for conceptual framework for thinking about how we design for online. For us in a law school, and I'm sure this is true in a number of disciplines, it's really suited to a sort of Socratic, engaged, peer-to-peer dynamic that we want to try and encourage, and that happens much more naturally, perhaps face-to-face. So it really focused on the need for cognitive presence, that is designing interactions that support sort of critical thinking, discourse, developing knowledge, and online has a lot of tech tools that do that. Social presence, which I think is really exceptionally important at this particular moment. So engaging with students, giving them the opportunity to engage with each other as well, even in just sort of really non-pedagogical ice-breaking type sessions where they get to have a bit of an informal chat. And teaching presence, that kind of pedagogical part that Ali focused on as well, in really designing and regulating learning without being too heavy-handed at the same time. And I think some variants of this also add a learner presence, which I think we need to be mindful of at the moment. What are their learning capabilities? What is their mindset going into this online learning? And how can we best create an environment that's conducive to them succeeding in that environment? So it's tough for us as teachers, I think. We not only have to have technological and disciplinary competency, but we have to develop an inclusive online pedagogical environment that's responsive, communicative, facilitates mentoring and provides support so that students aren't feeling isolated and disengaged. And I think we ought not to underestimate how difficult that task can be. And I think one thing Ali said as well is really important, that she chose technologies based on what was easy for her, what she understood, and that's been a really important factor in our discussions with teaching staff as well. They're going to engage best with the technologies if it's easy for them as well. So I think the next slide, sorry, I stuck a long time on this one, Ali. So key questions in thinking about then what technologies we do want to use and how to mix them into our teaching design. I think there are three questions that we sort of ask first, and Ali definitely highlighted the first one, which was that what are we seeking? What do we want to achieve? What are our teaching outcomes? And once we know that, we can go about then selecting the technology that best suits that. I think too often we flip it the other way around because we see something flashy online and think, I'd love to use that. But thinking about whether or not it actually is suited to your goals is really important. The tech choice isn't actually normally that hard. I think once you know what you want to do, you want students to collaborate in groups on a document, for example, or you're wanting to test their pulse every now and then through polls and so on. The technology is out there, but knowing what you want to do and how to best use it's important. And I think there's a couple of really key considerations when choosing that technology, and that the first is it available and supported by your institution, which sounds pretty obvious, but certainly encountered many, many instances where people have seen things outside the institution and said, I want to use that, even though there's an equally good solution to achieve the same goal that is institutionally supported. Obviously, at least in most institutions, I suspect that helps with access, it helps with training. Both students and staff get support on the use of that technology if needed, and it can create a bit of a community of practice around the use of that technology. So I think that's the first consideration. But also, and again, going back to Ali's point, is it easy and accessible both for faculty and for students? Is there a learning curve for faculty or students? Is there a registration process for students? Do staff and students need extra training? Is that available? And would they be willing to do it, even if it was? Is it something that requires really high bandwidth or good computer specs, which might put it out of reach for some students? And I think within that consideration, if that is the case, if there are some problems with it, then I think considering whether or not, even if that's the best technology to do the job, is there a second best simple technology that would make it more accessible is something to think about. And then how to integrate those technologies. I'll perhaps come back to this in a moment, but one thing that I have seen sometimes is that these technologies are just kind of dumped. They're chosen for specific tasks. They're siloed into a folder here or there, and they're not really part of a subject matter storytelling throughout a course. So you might be junted off to discussions in a folder here or readings over there and video somewhere else. And I think it's really important to integrate it as far as possible into your learning management system if you have one, so that it becomes a quite seamless progression through the subject for students. So next slide, if you could, Ellie. This is, I think, my last main slide. So how then to go about actually doing that in practice? I think the following key tips really hold up regardless of the subject matter. I know I'm law, but I would hold up for public health, I'm sure, and the level, whether you're doing undergraduate. I'm mainly teaching into postgraduate environment, but I think this would be equally applicable to preschool and so on as well. That first, planning is the key. And I think, again, this is really underestimated. And it wasn't something we could do really well in most cases when a number of universities went online really quickly this year. But I think everyone's discovered pretty quickly that it's really hard to just do online on the fly. It requires a lot of upfront planning to get it right. And you can't just turn up day one, because there'll be nothing in your LMS and everyone will be at a bit of a loss. And I think the second most important with the plan is to really start fresh when thinking about technologies. Don't think too much about what you do face-to-face normally and try and convert that into the online environment. Online's much, much more flexible with the technologies we have. We're not restricted to any sort of physical space, so we've got lots of tools in the toolbox to help with teaching. So pick the tools that are best for what you want to achieve and not the ones that necessarily look the most like what you're accustomed to face-to-face. Then obviously developing a clear outline and structure is really important when you're teaching online, particularly to students who aren't used to it. Because that toolbox is bigger, subjects are going to look more different between each other. So students don't necessarily know what the expectations are unless you spell them out really clearly. So that's really important. Regular, predictable communication, obviously very important. I think I've seen this happen along the spectrum where either there's virtually no communication or way too much spam-like communication occurring. So I think right at the outset, tell students how you'll be communicating, keep in touch regularly, but not all the time, and just do what you say you're going to do with that communication. Use Zoom, Teams, put students into communication with each other if that works to achieve your goals. I think staying connected, staying present are really important. And then the most important thing, which I think is the most difficult thing, and this comes down to the technology selection and how well it integrates with your LMS, is to really mix your passive activities, like Ellie was mentioning. You're just reading a document because I'm a lawyer, so there's lots of reading, but there might be lots of watching or doing other sorts of things, with your active engagement activities, like your discussion boards, like your online tutorials. Our experience this year with dozens of subjects has just been entirely consistent with what the literature predicts, that when you put passive material in between active content, like discussion boards and those tutorials, then the active engagements tend to be involve much better participation than if they're kind of standalone. So if it's read this, then go into this discussion board or go to this tutorial, as opposed to read everything and we might have one lecture at the end of the week, you'll get much better engagement with students. But that obviously requires a lot of planning. So I'm nearly done, I promise. So the key ultimately, I think, is simplicity and engagement. So not obviously simplicity from the faculty side. It's really, really hard from the faculty side. But is it simple on the user side? Does what you've put together with the various technologies flow? Is it easy for students to follow? Does the mix and sequence promote engagement? Do students know what you're expecting them to do? Why you're asking them to do these weird things they might not have done before? And then ultimately, just is that learning process an intuitive one for them? So they're not wasting time thinking about the tech and how to use the tech, that it's just a natural part of their learning journey through the subject. I do have a next slide, but I'm not going to speak to it because I've spoken too long already, and really it covers the same sorts of things Ali was mentioning and what we'll get a chance to have a bit more of a talk about over the next hour. So I'm going to do as I suggested we should, and move from our sort of passive, or my passive at least, information dump into breakout rooms where we can start really talking a bit more actively to each other. Melissa mentioned at the outset, we're going to spend, or Ali mentioned, I think, we're going to spend the next 30 minutes in breakout rooms in groups of about 5 or 6, I think. We put there randomly in a moment. Ali mentioned we're going to work on a collaborative document. I suspect we're going to put a link to that in the chat. Is that right, Ali, in a moment? So if you can grab that.
Oh, there it is. Mo's got it for us.
Excellent.
You, Mo. Wonderful.
You can click on that or just grab that link now. That'd be great. So what that is, it's a document that will have breakout rooms numbered on them with the questions we're asking you to have a look at. And so what we'd like you to do is, when you go to those rooms, spend a few minutes introducing yourselves to each other, where you're from, what your discipline is, perhaps something a bit more personal. You know, can you recommend a good podcast, TV show? I've learned a lot from my classes about what television programs I shouldn't watch this year. It's been great. And then we'd like you to nominate someone that can take some notes on that shared collaborative document. Nominate someone to keep track of time, so you're, after 30 minutes, not still on the first question. Make sure you get a chance to discuss them all, and perhaps nominate someone to report back once we come out of the breakout rooms into the broader group. I think that should give you about 6 or 7 minutes to discuss each of the questions. And then we'll come back and share our thoughts on all of those. So I think I've covered everything there, Ali. Let me know if I've missed anything before we all separate.
I just want to highlight something that you said, Julie, that I think really resonates with me as I think about these questions, which is, how do you communicate to students what your intention is? So if you're successfully integrating, how do your students understand that integration? And I think sometimes, what are the challenges that students have experienced as well? So not just your challenges, but also with the students.
Terrific.
Great, and I think Mo is going to click the magic button and put us into the breakout rooms. And we'll have 30 minutes, so 4 or so after the top of the hour, we'll come back together. Alice, thank you for sharing about the typhoon and how it's impacted students and faculty, everybody in your community.
You're welcome.
Well, we're all back, I think. I think I see the numbers still going up. Julie, do you want to lead us off on the report back? I can put the slide.
Sure. So, look, thanks everyone for, I know certainly in my group, we had a good discussion about some of the technologies we've used, and certainly some of the challenges that have really affected how we go about doing that. And I think coming back to making sure that any tech that's selected, there's a means to making it accessible to the whole student body, and that it is something, I guess the theme was also that it was something that we knew as teachers how to use, which was particularly important when doing it quickly. So what I wanted to do, what we hope to do for the next 30 minutes or so, is really go through these questions. I think we probably, I had thought, and we discussed this earlier, that we go through each of the three, but I think the second two questions really fit together. So let's just first, I think, focus on that first question. What have been some successful integrations of technology to support learning? If we perhaps focus on that to the exclusion of the challenges for the moment, and I'll just invite any groups to volunteer, and warn that if there are no volunteers, I'll just start randomly calling on someone to, or a group to volunteer on how or what technologies you've found have been successfully used this year. And perhaps are we using the hand raise feature might be the easiest way to do that, to get started.
Or if anyone's unmuted, I see a couple of people are unmuted. Oh, they've all muted themselves now.
Oh, no.
Victor, you saw that I saw that you were unmuted.
Nothing to say. I think Melissa. So what I use basically is the same as what you used earlier, which is Menti. Menti was quite an engaging thing, but it takes. The problem is that it takes time for you to set it up, and the question, you got to think of what question you want to ask, what answer you want to do, and of course you must make sure that the technology actually works properly. Like what Ellie did just now, forgot to allow us to answer many times for the first question, and we can only answer once. So those are the problems that I face also, the same problem. But I don't think it's only Ellie is facing the same problem. Everybody face the same problem. And by the time we basically, when we let the student answer, then we see all the problem. Then we're like, oh, what am I supposed to do? But just try to make the best use out of it. It's quite. I think Menti is the one that I like. Because of especially the one that is having the word where there's a lot of words you can put in, and it comes out in the word cloud. Word cloud is very nice.
Thanks, Victor. Now I'm going to pick on a group. I'm not sure whether that was Victor's group or not, just because I can see your Google Docs, and I can see that this one has a few comments on question 1. So I'm going to pick on group 6. Is there a nominated speaker from group?
Yeah, I'll do that, Mary.
Thank you.
Okay, so in our group, so we had somebody from Chile, and 2 people from the Philippines. So I was in New Zealand, and we were quite well set up already, and I think so we already had Canvas working, and we already had online lectures. The academic staff had always complained about lecture recordings because it meant people didn't come to class, but in fact it saved our bacon with COVID lockdowns, because we actually had last year's lectures, and we could actually sort of basically use them and then update them with any material or cut them into segments. So that was fantastic for us. And I'm a scientist, so I had to teach online labs, and that was one of the hardest things to work out how to do. But basically I only had about a week to get my first online lab up and running, and basically I had an epiphany that I could actually use the ungraded quiz feature within Canvas, so that the students could do the lab. So the lab was presented to them in PowerPoint with videos and photographs and other things, and so they had to label structures and, you know, which bit of the worm is this and all that kind of stuff. And then I used an ungraded quiz so that they could check whether they got it right. So I gave them the ungraded quiz, and they got 1 question at a time, so that they couldn't just rush forward into the end of the lab, so that they would get that done. And then they had a practical quiz. So the ungraded quiz was available until a certain day and time, and then the next day they had 24 hours in which they could do the graded quiz. And the graded quiz tested the learning objectives of the class very successfully. In fact, most of the students got like 90% in the graded quiz, which I was really happy because they actually did learn what I wanted them to learn. So those were some successes that we had from our end. But we were lucky, we had good technology. If you didn't have good technology, you were a little bit hampered, I think.
Yeah, no, that sounds great, and a good LMS certainly helps. Knowing how to use it, I find Canvas quite intuitive, but at the same time, if you've never used it before or any LMS before, there is still a learning curve in putting those together. I saw a really good lab quiz type thing used in a subject recently, but it strike me as being something that, unless you plan to use it multiple times, there was a lot of work that went into building it. But it used H5P, which integrated well with the LMS, and it was basically like the old-fashioned choose your adventure. You know, what should you do? It was kind of a pre-lab exercise where it was about cleaning and preparing for contaminated, I'm not a scientist, using contaminated material in a lab, and it was what should you do first in terms of cleaning hands, wearing gloves, things like that. And it kind of took you through, and you selected, and if you got it wrong, it would take you down one path, and if you got it right, it'd take you down another. And it was really fantastic. The technology's there to really simulate this sort of thing, but that sort of thing does require a lot of work as well.
But when I also, universities are basically like buying software. Like, we didn't have licenses to H5P in semester 1, but we did in semester 2 for limited number of licenses. And so in semester 2, the staff were able to make much slicker things than I did in semester 1. So yeah, it's about the university realizing that they need to provide resources too, which is not going to be.
Yeah. Can those people that use H5P? Can you share some of the things that you use, and maybe some of the activities that you can use with it, H5P? Anyone who have the technology how to do it? Because I have H5P, but I have not been using it.
I haven't used it a lot in my courses. I've used it to experiment, and I've seen it used in a number of other courses. So I saw this particular one was the most, I think, probably most sophisticated, but also the hardest, in that you really had to think, if they do X, then this screen will appear and Y. So you can get that complex, or just use it for quizzes. It can be used just as a way. For us, quizzes sometimes in Canvas, you tend to go somewhere else for a quiz. You can integrate it into modules, but it kind of takes you somewhere else. You can put a quiz partway down a page in Canvas if you use H5P to integrate it, which is helpful. You can kind of have annotated, slightly more interactive videos within H5P as well. So we've also used Padlets in a similar way because they're a bit more interactive. You can have timelines moving across in a sort of dynamic way, in a way that just the standard Canvas page, for example.
So you develop it yourself?
Well, we've had a mix. So some of the simple things, we've done ourselves for testing, just those quizzes and video integrations, the simple things. More complex things have tended so far, because they haven't been used widely, and we've just got the H5P integration. There is a free version, but the good integration with Canvas really depends on institutional investment. And we do have some investment in sort of showcase type subjects, which really push the bounds of some of these technologies to see how they work. And in those cases, you get learning technicians and designers that are working with people to figure out how these work. So the more advanced ones, I've not really been doing myself as not an educational technologist, but some of the simple ones are pretty easy for most people to use. And the university has started providing training on the basic use of that.
It's pretty intuitive. I mean, I went to a workshop and I learned how to use it really simply within about 2 hours. So,
yeah. Or maybe we should think about, I love this kind of how things work well. And there were a lot of challenges that came up in the conversation that I was in. Julie, what do you think if we move towards the challenges? And the
sure.
Come up with?
Can I dob in another group unless someone puts their hand up? And just because, again, there's quite a few challenges noted here. And there's a couple of groups identified with quite different challenges. So could I start with someone from group 7?
Well, that was the group I was in. JS, would you be willing to share some of the challenges that you were experiencing with your class? Because I think you've got a really kind of great example of both the challenges and how you've overcome them.
Yes. Okay. Because I'm teaching both practical classes and theory class, and they are, have different challenges across the class. Let's put on my practical classes. Because I'm teaching contemporary dance, where the student actually require a space to move around, which is a bit critical when they are now like learning dance at home. So it's very different from the lecture that you need to just sit here and listen to or just access with the laptop itself. So that itself create kind of problematic issues in terms of how I'm going to plan for the content, and also how I'm going to guide them into learning. So most of the challenges is how can I adjust my learning content that fit into the space. So first, I actually need to identify their challenge rather than my challenge. Means their challenge in their home space, how small the space they have, or the screen, even the screen, what video recording device they have, or what webcam they have, in order to have this, sorry, my house run out of electricity. There's no electricity now. I need to, can someone continue the conversations? Sorry. This is one of the problems.
Yeah, this is a problem. Sharada, would you be willing to pick up on some of the
It's a real life problem.
Real life
currently
problem.
happening.
Sharada, do you still have power? Would you be willing to share some?
Yeah, so I'm going to continue on a slightly different thread there, but maybe moving on to a different challenge, but that we all faced was Zoom fatigue, which is so real. So we were discussing that in the early days of the pandemic, moving online, I think everybody was excited about it. And then you have some challenges, you transit, you overcome those barriers, but then you begin to get really tired with, just looking at screens and these video thumbnails and looking at yourself and then toggling through all the different technology tools that learners are using online. And so there were two scenarios, one where the stakes are high, there are assessments associated with certain courses and classes, and then you mandate students to turn on videos, but they hate it. And then you have the one-off sessions, more faculty development type, where the stakes are low, but you enjoy sharing. And there you don't mandate, but then, it's really dependent on individuals. Some will turn on, some won't turn on. But that seems to be a very real challenge to keep the engagement going above the distractions. And then, having just the audio engagement sometimes rather than having both the AV. So that was another challenge that we discussed. Yeah.
That's great. Zoom fatigue's always been something that's worried me, because again, we've certainly had cases of staff and even students wanting this. I just want it to be like face-to-face, and so we'll do the same number of hours and we'll do it in the same way, and there's an obvious appeal to that, and it's the simplest. But one of the problems is it doesn't take too long before everyone is sick of being in Zoom. Yeah. And it's not like a physical classroom, because people do, as you say, turn their screens off. And it's I've seen lots of debates in the higher education Twitter circles and so on about, do you make them, and there's a lot of angry discourse around, how dare you make students turn their video on, and others saying, they show their face in class, why should we make that, and it's a really challenging question, and that's why we've tried to recommend a bit more of a mix. We've had some classes where that is the way to do it. They might be classes on negotiation or litigation, and that's the way it works best. In others it doesn't need to, and the mix can be a bit different, but that's definitely been a challenge for us too. I think I also saw group 2. I'd like to kind of discuss the challenges that you mentioned, because I think they're different challenges than the ones we just discussed in group 7, a bit more about the technological challenges. Is there someone from group 2 that would be willing to talk to that?
Josephine, do you want to share?
Sorry?
Hi, I'm from group 2. I think Josephine and Myra had a lot of challenges. Would Josephine from Group 2 like to share?
Okay, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I'm Josephine Cayaso from the University of the Philippines, Manila College of Nursing. So we are, as a university, we are using both the Moodle and the Canvas. And what we did was, as a preparation, was both the students and the faculty went through the Canvas technology because we were more familiar with the Moodle was the one we were using prior to the pandemic. And of course, I think we have the same challenges because in the Philippines, one of the major challenges we had with the students is the connectivity. And like the past 3 weeks, we've had 3 typhoons, which really hit the country, several parts of the country. So our students and even the faculty are having these problems with connectivity. But prior to that, we already anticipated that there will be problems with connectivity. So what the university mandated was that we developed course packs. So this course packs contain the course guidelines and the study guides. And then it also had, the study guides had the assignments. So what we had were the assignments. So this pack was sent to the students. There are students who had problems with connectivity. So what we did was we had modules delivered to the students, and those students who have problem with connectivity but they have their laptops available, we also had these materials in USB, and these materials were sent to the student before the start of the semester. Those materials which were not done because like we had very short time to prepare. And this is totally different for the faculty because we're totally online. There are no face-to-face activities, classes in the University of the Philippines. So all of the classes are done online. Some of them are synchronous, and then we had asynchronous. So what we did, because like we had challenges, was we had evaluations with the students wherein we set dates, wherein we set the students, and we tried to get the feedback of how they're doing with the learnings that they have. So we do an assessment of the learnings, and we do an assessment of and their progress on the methods that we're using. So based on this assessments, we tried to make adjustments. And so what we've also sent lectures for asynchronous activities. So we had the audio of the lectures of the faculty. And then for the exams, that's another thing to consider. Of course, the integrity of the exam is another thing which you have to look into. In our group, we had one faculty who's from the University of Santo Tomas, and apparently to check on the integrity of their examinations, they have an online app which will check the security of the browsing security during an exam, and we don't have that. So what we've been using in the college at the moment is utilizing all of the amenities available on the learning platforms. So the learning platforms had restrictions. So we've applied these restrictions to at least ensure the security of the exams. And I think the best way we've been doing for us to be able to ensure that we have a good learning platform is the feedback that we ask from our students. And what else? And for the clinicals, which is the hardest part, what we've done is the coupling of courses. Because in nursing, we have courses which has both laboratory, clinical, and the lecture. And of course, at this point, when it's purely online, the clinical and the laboratory part are the one which are suffering. So for the meantime, what we've done for the laboratory is we've uploaded the virtual materials which are from open learning sources so that the students can view them. And we started making simulation of laboratory activities. So it's in the process, we're doing it. And we're now focusing at this semester, we're focusing on the lectures. And then towards the next semester, that's why we decoupled it. Some of the lectures, some of the laboratory and the clinicals, once we've been allowed already, will be done during the second semester. And at the moment, to do that, the university is preparing the classrooms and the laboratories for the students to be allowed to go in. And of course, we're also in the planning on how we are going to conduct because of the number of students who would have to attend their laboratory and clinicals, and where we are going to do all of these clinicals. Because as nurses, we have the hospital and the community. And of course, this will be exposing our students and of course the faculty as well to the presence of persons who have COVID. So this is another thing we have to look into. So we're in the process of trying to put guidelines and policies on how we will manage the students, of course, because you have to look after the welfare of the students and the faculty as well. And of course, the patients. So we have a lot of things to consider. We're doing a period online now, and the whole university is in preparation for the second semester, which, because UP Manila has the health sciences, so all of our courses have clinical and laboratory. So this is our major challenge that we're trying to overcome at the moment, but we will get there.
Josephine, thank you so much. I think that you've really nicely articulated how so many different concerns we have to keep in mind at the same time. Us as the faculty in the classroom that now looks like this, the little boxes, or as we communicate with our administrators who are supporting us, as we communicate with the technology person, as we think about student progression and making sure that they are completing the degrees. I think you just really nicely encapsulated all of the complexities that we see. It's also, I would love if folks, I'm going to share my screen one last time as I'm conscious of the time, and I'd love to ask you in the chat if there's any ideas that you heard today that you would like to try out in your teaching. If you want to add those to the chat, I love kind of seeing the view of what was sparked for everyone who's on the call. And Josephine, you set this up so perfectly, because in the next session in a few weeks from today, we're going to talk about equity and access in remote teaching. And one of your colleagues from University of the Philippines in Manila is going to join me for the conversation about equity. And equity has come up quite a bit today. Do we require students to turn their screens on? What if they're at home with their family? My family is on the other side of a wall here that's open. And so they are being so good at being quiet, but that doesn't always happen in our spaces where we are. We would love to have as many of you join as you would like. Let's see. Oh, Flipgrid. Flipgrid is something that Victor would like to try. Great. I've heard really good things about Flipgrid. I tried it this fall. I thought that was going to be the technology I was going to do. And it was a moment where I couldn't figure out how to make it work perfectly. And so I switched to something that was going to be more easy for me. Jamboard, which is a Jamboard and Padlet, both allow for concept mapping and moving ideas around and connecting them. Rashid says H5P, which that's something new for me this evening to learn about. Any other tools or technologies that folks are interested in trying out now? Menti. Great. Menti has, many of them have a free version that allows for a few
2 questions.
Yep. I chose Menti because it was the cheapest version that I could get that would allow me for more questions, because I needed a few more than
it's okay. You can have a free one, you can have 2. So you basically you can have 2 times, you still can have 4, you can have 3 times, you have 6. I do it 2 times. So I have 4, 3 times I have 6.
Very smart, Victor. Thank you for sharing that tech. I should have called you. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
What's Python? Sorry, what's Python?
I don't know what Python is.
Portun, what's Portun? And we won. We won. Can someone explain? What's that? I haven't heard of that.
I think it's a sort of cartoon animated video system. So
Alright.
it can be really cool if you don't want to see your own video on a presentation, and I've seen it used pretty powerfully to just create little stories that start a conversation. Little cartoon, basically.
Right. Or
So they're
video
both video
creation
creation
tool.
tools. Great, great.
That's great. I would try it out. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Vinod. Vinoti. It's great.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. As every time we
And what's
have one of
Pigeonhole?
these, I think that I always learn something, and it's a really great conversation.
Yeah, great.
to connect with people.
Pigeonhole. Polling. Okay.
More polling. Pigeonhole.
Pigeonhole.
Oh, Sharon, that's another similar to Menti or other polling software?
Pigeonhole. Interesting.
We'll try it. Okay.
You'll try it, and then we can give what we have experienced the next time we meet again.
That's a great idea. When we come back on December 3rd or 4th, depending on where you are in the world. Right. I love that idea. Come with the ideas of what you've tried and share them out. And think, and as we're doing that, think about equity. Think about how are you creating an environment where all of your students have an opportunity to succeed and do the learning that we want them to have.
Right. Great.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Melissa,
see you. Bye.
Thanks for the kind introduction.
Yes, thank you to both Julie and Ellie.
Thank you. Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Julie. Interesting conversation.
Okay, thank you very much.